Good afternoon and welcome to the College of Complexes. My name is Tim. I'd like to welcome everybody today to our college tonight, where we have Mark Burrows speaking on the subject of labor. The College of Complexes consists of the following format. One, we'll have a brief announcements period. Then our speaker will speak up to an hour or thereabouts. Then we'll have a question and answer period. After our question and answer period, we'll enter our rebuttal period where you get to speak on or off subject for a certain specified amount of time, usually about 4 to 5 minutes, depending on the amount of people in there. And then speaker will get the last word, and we usually wrap things up about 9 o'clock or so. So, Charlie, if you're ready, we can start with the announcements on your College of Complexes thing. So let me know when you're ready to go.
Okay, I'm ready right now, boss.
All right. Well, not the boss, but you know.
All right. Well, welcome to meeting number 3632 of the College of Complexes, the playground for people who think. Okay, first of all, we have relatively new Google email group. So if you want to get announcements, upcoming programs, there's instructions there, link. Send a blank email to that location and you'll be all set. There also is a meetup group with only 1 or 2 meeting notices per week, not any traffic. So I'd highly recommend everyone do that as well. So you keep up on the latest program at the College of Complexes. Okay, first of all, and also, I'd like to mention that we have presently, before I get into the schedule, 2 open dates, October 9th and 30th. So if you'd like to speak or know of an individual or organization we should invite, please let me know because we would like to fill these dates. Again, October 9th and 30th. Okay, although I am not a capitalist, I will give an advertisement for upcoming programs. On September the 11th, Jim Fencer, who is the founder of the Scholars and Academics, academic personnel regarding 9/11, will be talking on the topic of reality or illusion. So if you want to learn about 9/11, we'll see you next week then. He's up from Madison, Wisconsin. On September the 18th, very important topic is how to have a green America, which I know each of you wants. Very important. This is a nationwide organization. You can read their mission, vision, and focus. They have a nationwide, very informative publication. And so it'd be good, very informative program if you care to get involved in ecological issues, which everyone should be, of course, as residents of the planet. On September the 21st, the author will be returning. He toured the United States at the height of the pandemic, and he's going to talk about, he discussed, interviewed many, many people. And so the topic will be America in a pandemic. So that one should be a hot one. Okay, on October the 2nd, I see that she has joined us tonight. Jan Lee will be talking on a taste of Taoism. So this should be a very informative program. I've actually listened to a couple lectures to refresh myself on Eastern philosophy. So I highly can recommend it. She usually puts together a very structured and informative program. Now we skipped October the 9th, I said is open. And October the 16th, we're going to have a very important topic, is going to be on senior fraud protection. And this isn't necessarily limited to seniors. There's all sorts of individuals who've try to fleece people. I myself actually got a telephone call today regarding my social security and that I had to talk to a magistrate, which is singularly amazing because I'm not under social security as a civil service employee, but nevertheless a disturbing telephone call. Actually, I received two of them. These guys are out there. Watch yourselves, folks. They're nefarious, and this ought to be an important one. This gentleman is from DuPage College, local college, um, and has a weekly radio program. Okay, in terms of two announcements, for those of you in the Chicago area, there'd be something of a grand opening, they claim, at the Pullman factory, the railroad car manufacturer on the south side of Chicago. If you look up Pullman, you can get the details. Usually events are at 9 o'clock. If you have not been down there, they've been making various progress and restoration of the factory and the neighborhood. And there's usually several events in progress, usually commencing around noon. So that's on the far south side of Chicago. If you haven't been there or haven't been there recently, I highly recommend taking a hike down there on Monday. Now, another thing that I've been active in is a campaign in progress against an Nabisco company. The employees in 6 states are on strike. And I've been working social media and the organized labor community to boycott Nabisco products, specifically Oreos, Chips Ahoy, and Ritz crackers. So if you, and I've been contacting various groceries and pharmacies saying we don't want them stocking scab products, scab snacks. So, okay, please join with us and I'll turn it over to you, sir. Thank you
Right.
very much.
I just want to give a shout out for our Dallas campus. They're meeting on Thursdays, and you can get to their website by going back to the. You can always see that from our link at our college, and if you go to the Dallas campus website, which you can probably see, which is the Texas campus link here, you'll see they're having some presenters. They're still on Zoom, but they meet on Thursdays on September 9th, what America should have learned from 20 years of wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And they've got Thursday, September 16th is also open for them. So you got 2 chances to speak at the college here. And I haven't been to the Thursday meetings yet because my Toastmasters are stuff's on Thursdays, but I know Tom Barry, I've been there before and it works pretty good. Okay, I'd like to now introduce our speaker tonight, if he's ready to go. Mark, why don't you introduce yourself and go ahead and start telling us about your speech and what you're going to talk about. And you got the next hour or so, so please go ahead. If you need to share screen, it's at the bottom. So thanks a lot.
Okay. First of all, if there've been some action out on the street, and if I need to close my windows, if the background noise is too much, let me know. I've been hearing sirens going by. I don't know how it comes through the mic. So if it's distracting, let me know. I won't repeat the introduction that was on the leaflet. I guess maybe I'll sum it up a little bit. I've been a retired locomotive engineer, longtime member of Railroad Workers United, and I'll say a little bit about them. I was a delegate for the last 2 conventions while I was still working in 2011 and 2014. And one of them, the 2011 convention, I was able to give us fight for 5 minutes of floor time and quote Eugene Debs, which got a standing ovation. So that was very that was a highlight of my life, I would say, or one of them. But so I've been a longtime member of Railroad Workers United, and I'll say a little bit more about them in a second. But I'd like to start with the first order of business. I'd like to give a shout out to several important labor battles happening right now in real time on this Labor Day 2021. And Charlie beat me to it, but the first shout out goes to the approximately 1,000 workers around the country. I think it's 5 or 6 states actually, including 325 here with the BGTCM Union Local 1 against Nabisco and the parent company Mondelez. And just fighting for dignity. And there's a very important strike of approximately 1,100 United Mine Workers at Warrior Met Coal in Alabama, fighting to reclaim concessions that were stolen from them, literally blackmailed when the former company had gone bankrupt, and the new one just basically put a figurative gun to their head and said, make these concessions or else we're going to close up. And so now they want them back. When they see the obscene profits that they're making, they want them back. And so that's an important battle. Approximately 650 workers are locked out at a mobile Exxon refinery in the Dallas area. It's actually the 3rd largest refinery there. And again, union busting, the same story, concessions. And there's also an important strike. 700 nurses are on strike at St. Vincent Hospital in Massachusetts. And they've been on strike for about 5 months. And one of their major demands is to lower the nurse to patient ratio. And that's something that's obviously in the general public's interest. So all of these strikes have, big potential implications. Obviously, if the bosses win and bust the unions, that sets us back. If our class can gain a few victories, that gives us some momentum. And so kind of a constant tug of war that we've been in with them for many years. There's a common thread with all these struggles outside of the respective circumstances, but it's ultimately all about dignity on and off the job, safety, and in the case of the nurses, that safety impacts our safety. And so I'll leave it there. So again, like I said, there's a lot of it at stake for all of us in these respective battles. I want to say a little bit about Railroad Workers United, just for anyone who's not familiar with us. I'm going to quote here from the insert that we put on page 2 of our quarterly newsletter, the Highball, that gives a brief description and history. Railroad Workers United was organized in April 2008 at a founding convention in Dearborn, Michigan. RWU grew out of decades of struggle within the craft unions for unity, solidarity, and democracy. We're carrying on a tradition of rank and file activity, which dates back to the 1890s and the time of Eugene V. Debs. RWU is a cross-craft inter-union caucus of rail labor activists across North America, and all rail workers of all rail crafts from all rail carriers who support our statement of principles are welcome to join in our efforts. And just to summarize our statement of principles: unity of all rail crafts, an end to inter-union conflict, rank and file democracy, membership participation and action, solidarity among all railroaders, and no to concessionary bargaining. I'd like to introduce myself and my background, not so much to toot my horn, but essentially to preemptively answer the question, just in case any of you might be wondering, who the hell am I and why the blank should you give a hoot as to what I have to say, my thoughts, opinions, observations, analysis, and conclusions. And I also feel that as I was kind of going over it, I really feel that my varied experiences have given me a very well-rounded perspective to better be able to understand the issues that the working class faces. But before I go any further with that, I want to acknowledge and reference my hero, Eugene B. Debs. Hopefully I'll have more to say about him later. He was a passionate, intense fighter for social justice with ironclad convictions based upon the intersection of his real life experiences and intellectual research that made sense of those experiences and vice versa. How his real life experiences and observations served to validate the economic and political analysis that he had become convinced of. As he spoke to the workers in the 1890s and the first 2 decades of the 20th century, imploring them to get in touch with their worth, inspiring them, challenging them to struggle and resist, trying to convince them of their worth and their potential economic and political power in order to challenge the plutocracy and robber barons of that day. He would stress, and this isn't a verbatim quote, it was a common theme, but he would tell them, quote, "Don't take my word for this. Go study and research the facts on your own. And if you do, I'm confident you'll arrive at the same conclusions I have." And I feel this concept is very critical as we collectively interact, sharing our experiences, observations, engaging in civilized discussion, debating our respective opinions, analysis, and conclusions on how to move forward. There's no doubt a fair amount of common ground, while at the same time, there's certainly different viewpoints. That said, most of us can probably agree that we are living in interesting times at best, and sometimes frightening times at worst. There are days we watch the news, read the paper, and ask, can it get any worse? And then sometimes the next day it inevitably does. But we're not here to despair. I say we celebrate the tenacity of our forefathers and foremothers, the tenacity of everyone who is resisting injustice in all its forms, locally, national, international, from police brutality to crimes against humanity around the world, from unsafe, undignified workplaces to the destruction of the environment and mistreatment, discrimination, and/or oppression of so many segments of society in so many forms and manifestations. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there to hopefully set a constructive tone. Myself, I started working at the Chicago Northwestern Railway, which has been gobbled up by the Union Pacific at age 18 in 1974. Within a year, I'd become a locomotive engineer, and I worked there till 1986 when I took a buyout. The railroads had secured an agreement they long sought to eliminate the position of firemen, and they were able to do that through attrition. So engineers were getting bought out all over the country at that point in time. So for 5 years, I worked a variety of odd jobs and ended up moving to the Twin Cities for a few years. I had a mixed bag of odds and ends, small scale, low intensity factory production jobs, which I had known nothing but railroading since my whole adult life. So for a brief while, I worked in a couple of meat packing plants. One was just a packing house with prepackaged stuff, but the other was actually a slaughterhouse. And this was right around the period of the Hormel strike, meat packers in Austin, Minnesota, which I'll say a little bit more about that later. But there I was able to learn firsthand of the dangers of working in that industry, the conditions, I understood why they were on strike, as they were always trying to crank up the line speed and reduce the workforce. It was intense. It was one of the most intense situations I'd ever experienced. I spent some time on the inside on the production line, working in a virtual refrigerator, making certain cuts over and over as the slabs of meat came my way. But I also spent some time on the outside where we actually brought in the hogs from the outside to the kill line. There were 4 of us, and they reduced that to 3 and cranked up the line speed 25%. I'd heard about factories and industries cranking up assembly line speed, but since then, up until then, my only industrial experience had been on the railroad. I simply hadn't experienced it in real life up until that point. My memory flashed back to that I Love Lucy episode where they were getting overwhelmed on the assembly line of a candy factory. That was funny, that was funny, but this wasn't. I ended up getting fired from that job, and that's the only job I ended up getting fired from. And I got to tell you, even though I needed the job and I needed the money, it was actually a relief. I actually celebrated that day. Another interesting experience I had, I worked part-time at a short line railroad based in the southwest part of the state. These short lines, what they were called, they popped up after the deregulation craze in the 80s, where the big major class 1 railroads would abandon rural lines or sell them to sometimes real legitimate ma and pa, small scale capitalist wannabes. But more often than not, they were just glorified paper shuffles where the ownership and investor still remained intact, but the workforce was let go. The union was essentially eliminated, and then people could get hired back at drastic cuts in wages, working conditions, and with no union. And sometimes, in some cases, big investment companies would buy up a whole bunch of short lines and run them as well. But because they were non-union and virtually unregulated, they ended up serving as a laboratory to experiment with future changes in the work rules that would end up being implemented in the industry as a whole. So today, rail labor is in a pitched battle to hold off the implementation of single employee engineer-only trains. As far back as 1987, I experienced engineer only. The engineer would run the train by himself, and the conductor would drive around in a truck to spot various rural industries and grain elevators. So back in 2014, I think it was, when the Burlington Northern proposed a tentative agreement for single employee crews, which included a master utility conductor that drove around the countryside in a truck to help out the lone engineers wherever they might be when necessary. That sounded very familiar, like, yeah, been there, done that. I finally ended up at the Ford production plant making Rangers and F-150s. They were always trying to speed up, only with a little more subtlety. They would take 3 jobs and combine them into 2, so you had to do a little bit more work, speed up the line just a little bit just to push it to the max to see if you can handle it. In the late 80s, I ended up in Northwest Illinois for a couple of years, and the only work available was that as a carpenter apprentice. I got some training through the Carpenters Union, which was cool, but it was also quite an experience because up until then, my whole work experience had been adversarial. It was always us, the workers, against them, the bosses. That was all I knew about working as an adult. And whereas the Carpenters Union pitch was, union carpenters do it better. So they promoted work better, work faster, work harder, work more efficiently, to show the boss that it's in their interest to hire union carpenters. So needless to say, there was no adversarial relationship, just competition among all the many union carpenters to see who could be the most badass workers, and those would be the ones who would get hired. Now that was many years ago. I can't speak for what the state of those trade unions are now, and that was only a small sample size, but it was very eye-opening, to say the least. So 5 years later, from the time I left the Chicago and Northwestern, the railroads had all cut themselves to the bone and were ready to start rehiring many of the engineers that they had bought out 5 years previously. In fact, when I got hired on the Sioux Line, which had been formerly the Milwaukee Road and now better known as the Canadian Pacific, the whole class that I was hired with was all experienced engineers off the street who had taken the buyout in 1986 and were now looking for work. So we're here Labor Day. And so since we're recognizing Labor Day, let's talk about its origins. And anyone who heard me speak the last time knows that I'm very opinionated about this and that I consider this Labor Day and however it's designated, the first Monday weekend of September, to actually be a sham and a fraud. Our Labor Day should be the same Labor Day for the rest of the working class around the world. And that's May Day, May 1st, International Workers' Day. Once upon a time, it was our holiday. In the aftermath of the struggle for the 8-hour day in the mid-1880s, culminating with the Haymarket Massacre here in Chicago, May Day, International Workers' Day, has been celebrated around the world and in large part to honor the martyrs of the Haymarket Massacre and celebrate that struggle for the 8-hour day. May Day was our Labor Day in this country up until the aftermath of the Pullman strike. And it's noteworthy that the Pullman National Memorial is actually opening this weekend. Obviously, I haven't got a chance to go down there, but I saw a few brief clips about it on the news and saw pictures pertaining to the Pullman strike and even a big picture of my main man, Brother Eugene himself. The guy being interviewed for a minute soundbite made reference to the Pullman strike and how Labor Day came out of it. So I want to actually quote from the actual website of the Pullman National Monument. And I'll interrupt myself for a few corrections, clarifications in real time that I just feel need to be stated for the record. But this is actually from the website for the Pullman Memorial National Monument. In 1894, when manufacturing demand fell off, Pullman cut jobs and wages and increased working hours in his plant to lower costs and keep profits. But he did not lower rents or prices in the company town. The workers eventually launched a strike. When violence broke out, he gained the support of President Cleveland for the use of US troops. The strike and boycott shut down much of the nation's freight and passenger traffic west of Detroit. The newly created American Railway Union was led by Eugene Victor Debs, a pacifist and socialist who later founded the Socialist Party of America. All right, got correction number one, got to clarify this. Debs was not a socialist at this point in time. He would explain it very clearly in his writing, How I Became a Socialist, that while he was in jail up in Woodstock, as a consequence of his leadership in the Pullman strike, and many supporters, socialists of the day, mailed him, visited him, and gave him socialist literature for him to peruse while he was to make constructive use of his 6 months. And it was there that he studied and applied what he was reading to his experiences. And that's when he became a socialist. And that's right from his own description. So had to clarify that. He wasn't a socialist at the time of the Pullman strike. But anyway, getting back to the website's depiction of events. Under the leadership of Debs, sympathetic railroad workers across the nation tied up rail traffic to the Pacific. Strikers and Debs gave Pullman 5 days to respond to the union demands, but Pullman refused to negotiate. On June 26, all Pullman cars were cut from trains. When union members were fired, entire rail lines were shut down and Chicago was besieged. One consequence was a blockade of the federal mail. Violence broke out between rioters and federal troops that were sent to protect the mail. All right, time for another clarification break. At the request of the rail carriers and the big businesses, President Cleveland ordered the federal militias to break up the strike under the pretext that they were disrupting the US mail. I mean, in my personal opinion, if the situation truly called for government intervention, the power of the government could have been used to impose a just settlement for the Pullman workers and to ensure that the railway workers could be able to return to their jobs with no discipline or blacklist. But that's obviously not how it turned out. So anyway, back to the website's version of those events. By the end of July, 34 people had been killed. The strikers were dispersed, the troops were gone, and the courts had sided with the railway owners, and Debs was in jail for contempt of court. Pullman's reputation was soiled by the strike. In 1894, in an effort to conciliate organized labor after the strike, President Grover Cleveland and Congress designated Labor Day as a federal holiday. Legislation for the holiday was pushed through Congress 6 days after the strike ended. So, with the exception of those few corrections, that's a pretty accurate telling of how what we know as Labor Day came into being. I mean, it's expected that the politicians would continue to perpetuate this sham and fraud, but for the leadership of the AFL-CIO to continue to be complicit in this is a betrayal of their stated mission and the working class that they claim to represent. By running 180 degrees in the opposite direction of educating the working class about the need for international solidarity to resist the efforts to divide and conquer, leave us that much more vulnerable to those elementary tactics. And a classic example, you see it as a layer of the working class gets whipped up into a frenzy about immigration that they end up voting for somebody who is so anti-labor and who totally against their interest. One of the reasons that Trump was so popular among a layer of the working class, as well as Trump wannabes. So that's just one example of how we're vulnerable and preyed upon with this basic divide and conquer tactic. It's obviously contributed to a significant decline in international solidarity and an increase in elitism among a layer of the working class. And an increase in fact, back in the 80s, where the increase in buy American chauvinism really took off. In the 80s, smashing and beating Japanese cars ultimately evolved into beating a Japanese worker to death. So that's one end of the spectrum of how things can go when we get sucked into and lose the concept of international solidarity. But the tide has begun to turn. In 2006, immigrants, close to 2 million workers around the US and hundreds of thousands in Chicago, disrupted construction, agriculture, meatpacking, and other industries dependent on immigrant labor as they demonstrated, unofficially walked out, just didn't show up for work that day, whatever you want to call it. And they began to reclaim May Day as the real Labor Day for the US working class. They were protesting anti-immigrant legislation, calling for legalization of the undocumented, protesting raids and deportations, and in essence, taking to the streets to proclaim, fight for, and assert their dignity. And when the vast majority of the working class figures out the need to follow that lead, well, then we'll be getting somewhere. And I just kind of want to make note, as I was researching this and just kind of going back and revisiting some of this, it struck me that back around this time, Hillary Clinton, while Bush was actually comparatively trying to modify and in response to this, gave lip service to the concept of immigration reform, Hillary Clinton was talking about building a wall. It just struck me. It was virtually Trumpism, what Hillary Clinton was promoting back in 2006. So I don't want to go off on that tangent, but it just really stood out to me as I was going over and revisiting some of this stuff. So prior to that, where in 2006, the hundreds of thousands around the country took May Day. Prior to that, there had been little recognition for May Day among US workers. And since that unprecedented May Day demonstration in 2006, subsequent May Days have seen demonstrations to varying degrees, varying numbers, varying components, usually driven by immigration rights fighters in alliance with various leftist coalitions, social justice activists, and some progressive wings of the established labor movement leadership, usually low to mid-level union leaders. I've yet to see anything like the AFL-CIO saying that we should take back May Day as our official Labor Day, but a fair amount. A lot of times the longshoremen's unions have been involved. They've always been very progressive. And so there's, I feel there's hope. It's been uneven with ebbs and flows, but I just think it's very important to get out and participate in May Day rallies, demonstrations, and to try to bring back that history. In my personal opinion, we need more of that. We need more of that, and whatever we can do to expand upon this, we'll be in a much stronger position to fight for our rights and dignity when our Labor Day is in alliance and in solidarity with the working class around the world, instead of a 3-day weekend at home at the beginning of September for barbecues and mattress sales. It's a major challenge for the US working class to reconnect with our history, to learn our history, to learn about past struggles, to learn about past resistance, to learn about past victories, to learn about past defeats, to apply the totality of all of the lessons from the good, the bad, and the ugly of our collective historical experience. Last time when I spoke, and I don't want to be redundant, but it's worth noting that back in 1984, I had always been aware, on top of things, was always following the news and watching the news, very aware of current events and very opinionated about things around 1980, I ran into some socialists on the job at the Chicago Northwestern, and after quite a bit of clashes with, what about this, what about that, everything that I had been taught to fear and dismiss. But they dealt with me judiciously, and so in 1984, as a supporter of the then Nicaraguan Revolution, not to dwell into what has happened since that time, that's a whole separate discussion. But at the time, it was a very promising development where the working class had taken power and was using that power in their interest. And so I visited the revolution for May Day, and I was talking with a young Sandinista soldier, and when I told him he was from Chicago, that I was from Chicago, he oh, Chicago, Haymarket, and I'm not embarrassed to say that I did not know what he was talking about, because I was never taught that. The school system, even my own union, I'd been working at the railroad for several years. There had never been any attempt to teach me that part of labor history. I had to learn about the Haymarket, or at least be exposed to it. Then when I got back, I kind of studied it to see what he was talking about. And at the time, I lived over at Chicago and Noble, just a few blocks from where it all went down. And I was totally clueless. And I think that's just a very telling example of how we get robbed of our history. And it's very conscious. It's very premeditated. They don't want us to know that history. And so just had to point that out. Obviously, over the years, it's been ebbs and flows for labor. We've had some, probably the most significant conquest to talk about is the formation of the Congress of Industrial Organizations. The major battles in the 30s that has helped to bring us to where we are. And while in the early part of the 30s there were struggles and defeats, the tide was turned in 1934 with three major battles: the Longshoremen San Francisco General Strike, the Toledo Auto Strike, and the Teamsters General Strike in Minneapolis that ultimately led to the organizing of the over-the-road truck drivers and helped build the Teamsters Union at that time. And so major conquests. Have there been setbacks? Of course. Do we have a lot of work left to do? Of course. But it's important to be cognizant of those conquests and to study and learn how we conquered with rank and file initiative, with militant leadership, with the same kind of determination that we see here and there in these various struggles. I want to make note of a few recent battles of over the last several years, and this is just a small sample. There's many, but a few that stand out to me. In 1977, major coal miners strike that coincided with their efforts to democratize their union. And one of the highlights of that battle was when they, I think the famous line, when they tried to invoke Taft-Hartley, the coal miners, the rank and file just said, Taft can haul it and Hartley can shovel it. That was their response to the attempt at government intervention. I made reference to the Hormel strike in 1986, and I want to just talk about it a little bit. I was not working at the time. That's when had the buyout with the Chicago Northwestern, and I got to spend some time there, participate in a couple of the big solidarity rallies, and there was one event where they put out a call to help them shut down production. For those of you who are not aware, when they attempted to shut down production to keep scabs from coming in, they actually brought the National Guard was literally encamped around the plant. When I drove up there, when I drove up there on the interstate to get up there, it was like a war zone. Just military vehicles just surrounding the plant. And so they put out an appeal to rank and file workers to help shut down production. And they set up this ring of cars around the gate. And so at first, so then and we were inside, the ring of cars, and tow truck operators came to try to move them, and they were getting beaten by the workers, and so they backed off. And so then the state police came in, and this was intense. I mean, this was these workers literally, as the state police tried to clear them out, they were engaged in fierce hand-to-hand combat. I was I was kind of a layer or two behind, so I'm not going to make some boast that I did help when there were some instances where they were trying to arrest a worker, and then some of us would pull him back like a literal human tug of war. I was able to participate in that, but it was quite an experience. Eventually, the only way they could break us up was with tear gas, and even then, when they started lobbing the tear gas, the workers had masks. Some of them had masks and mitt gloves, and they threw them back, and some of the state troopers went down because they weren't prepared. They just thought it was going to be a walkthrough, and they got taken down by their own tear gas. Eventually, we had to retreat, and they won the day. But it was that experience has just always stuck with me for so many reasons. The tenacity of the workers when they've been pushed to the wall, there was just they were going to resist. They were going to resist. And this was stuff I'd read about in the history books, and I felt like I was experiencing both a glimpse of the past as well as a glimpse of our future, because they're going to keep pushing. They're going to keep pushing. And I know my experiences have shown me that workers will resist, and the state will resist those workers resisting, and these kind of things will happen. And so I feel I got a taste of both the past and the future, and it's an experience that will always stay with me. More recently, we saw I think in 2009, Black Jewel Miners, that's the name of the coal mine. They went bankrupt and tried to not pay the workers what they were owed. We don't have it. So, probably a couple weeks worth of wages. And they actually occupied the tracks to keep coal from going in and out. Very militant, very unified, very assertive, not begging politicians to intervene. It was right now, and they eventually won. And so we've lost more than we've won, but there's lessons to be learned when we lose, and occasionally we do win. And I think one of the most important lessons is if you resist, you may not win, but you're guaranteed to not win anything if you don't resist. And finally, I want to close. I want to wrap this up with my own personal opinion. In my opinion, I was convinced of this over 40 years ago, and it's only stood the test of time. That the only way forward for the working class is to find our way towards political independence, to break from the two-party system, especially the Democratic Party. This is where workers get roped into. Find our way to the formation of an independent political party that can galvanize the working class, the vast majority of us. We're numerically superior. We make the wealth. We're economically, we have economic advantage. And we need an independent political party with the foundation of labor in alliance with all other activists and fighters for social justice. And on that note, I just want to give a shout out. There's a recent organization. I think they've been in formation for the last year. I'm still checking them out myself. It's called the Movement for a People's Party. Their website is, I don't know how to do all this. I'm a technical, some people have called me a Luddite. So I haven't gotten the screen share stuff down, but the website is thepeoplesparty.org. They have a very progressive platform, and it's an attempt to build an independent political party. It's a work in progress. Like I said, I'm looking into it more and exploring the possibility of getting actively involved. Only time will tell to see if this is the beginning of what we need. If enough like-minded people if we can actually build it into something and develop it into what we need to be, if it can pass the tests and challenges as they will inevitably be posed, all of that remains to be seen. But I do. Anyone who is also thinking along these lines, or at least has contemplated the thought of the need for an independent political party, to at least check it out, peoplesparty.org. There's some heavy hitters involved, for better or for worse, such as people like Susan Sarandon, Oliver Stone, Cornel West, Chris Hedges. There's some labor involvement, some mid-level. There's a kind of a mid-level official of the Postal Workers Union. I don't have his name and credentials off the top of my head, but it's promising. And so all I say is I'm checking it out, and I just simply want to give a shout out for others to at least check it out and draw your own conclusions. And finally, I want to close with Railroad Workers United generally puts out a statement, and while it's geared towards rail workers, all there's a message in it for all of the working class. So this is RWU's Labor Day greetings. A time to commit to solidarity, unity, and action. Dear railroad sisters and brothers, whether you are off work or on the job on Monday, please take the time to honor, remember, and celebrate Labor Day. This is our day. So much of what we workers take for granted today: overtime pay, holiday pay, vacations, sick leave, workers' comp and FELA, Social Security and railroad retirement, safer working conditions, the basic 8-hour day, seniority, and more, only came about because workers came together, organized, and fought for these things collectively. If it were not for our solidarity, we would have none of the above, and there certainly would be no such thing as Labor Day itself. But Labor Day has mostly become a day for picnics and barbecues, political stumping and speech making, political posturing and, quote, remembering our, quote, past heritage. But what if we were to put some life into Labor Day? What if we were to take joint actions with our allies who understand that single employee crews are a danger to all? What if we were to show the corporations, politicians, and union leaders that we are not simply going to honor and remember on Labor Day? What if we were to show our power and were to picket, demonstrate, strike, and occupy? To accomplish any and all of this requires that we act in solidarity with one another. As we all know, in unity there is strength. But railroad workers have been divided by craft and group, property, and union for way too long. This Labor Day, pledge to commit yourself to boundless solidarity and unity with your fellow railroad workers going forward. Contract bargaining at the national level will commence in just 2 months. Critical issues of concern to railroad workers such as healthcare, wages, crew staffing, and worker safety will be on the table in 2020-21. To win good contracts, it is imperative that railroad workers from all crafts, all unions, and all properties stick together in the struggle. So let's stop crying and whining about our situation while we sit on our hands and hopelessly wait for some politician, government agency, or union official to save us. RWU appeals to each and every working railroader to stand up, take the bull by the horns, speak out, and fight back. Let's make our demands known and let our power be realized. To win better wages, benefits, and working conditions, it is up to all of us working railroaders to make it happen. As the RWU slogan proclaims, the rank and file in action. On this Labor Day, you will see lots of flags flying. You will hear lots of politicians bucking for your vote, and you will smell lots of hot dogs grilling. But please remember, all this has little to do with the true spirit of the holiday. Labor Day is about working people and our historic and gallant struggle through strikes, boycotts, picket lines, sit-ins, occupations, and more to further the cause of the working class. Railroad Workers United is proud to be part of this great tradition of working people fighting back against the wealthy and powerful, excuse me, the big corporations and the Wall Street bankers. We invite you to join us in this fight. Solidarity forever. Ron Kamenko, our RWU General Secretary. So I figure that's a good place to leave it. Thank you very much.
Okay, so go ahead. Well, let's thank our speaker. And let's thank our speaker real quick again for a good presentation. We are now into our question and answer period. And I'd like to ask anybody who's got a question at this time to Margaret. Go ahead if you got a question, please.
Quick question for Mark. When did we cease celebrating May 1st as Labor Day? Oh, what year was it approximately? I know so after the Pullman strike.
It was in the brief period going back into it was after the Haymarket massacre. That was in 1986, and
or was that 1886?
Yeah, 1886, and as part of the buildup, there had been a call that like on May 1st and I think in that year 400,000 workers around the country kind of took off, went on just a strike protest as part of the fight for the 8-hour day, and so in the subsequent years, especially after the Haymarket massacre, May Day was kind of our Labor Day. Yes. And that changed with the legislation right after the Pullman strike in 1896. That kind of changed that turned it over to September. So it was that brief period during and in the immediate aftermath of the Haymarket massacre. The rest of the world still goes with that.
And I just thought that I was more inclined to think it had to do with the Cold War against communism. And we did not want to support May 1st because that had quotes, communist, close quotes, connotations. But it really happened a lot earlier before World War I even.
Yeah, right. Certainly they have, since that time and in the, as the Cold War developed and as, when it got to a point where you could say, see those commies on May Day, that certainly added more fuel,
Because I can remember my aunt taught in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and she was very much English, drama, etc. And they would have a May Day crowning of a young man and a young woman as king and queen. This would have been in the 40s. And so, now we don't really hear much about it, except in the Catholic Church. At May 1st, May is Mary's month, and so it's a big deal. But I just thought that we stopped celebrating it more because we didn't want any association with communists. But this has been very helpful, Mark. I've loved the presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, the whole anti-communist thing conveniently came in afterwards.
I wanted to thank Mr. Burrows for reminding us what Labor Day is about.
And Mark, I have a question here, a pretty short question. What is the purpose of a conductor on a freight train? That I can't wrap my head around that. And I ride a passenger commuter rail train every day. Now they have conductors because they have to go up and down the aisles, punching tickets and things like that. But what does a conductor do on a freight train?
Well, on a freight train and even on the passenger train, the conductor does a lot of the same work, only, but there's all kinds of paperwork. Before you start your trip, there's speed restrictions. Maybe a section of track has been downgraded from 60 to 35. So from point A to point B, 35 miles an hour. You've got track workers from this milepost to that milepost. Stop unless you get an okay from the track foreman, or you could run over a bunch of track workers. So there's track bulletins, there's speed restrictions. Knowing what's actually in the train. Sometimes you're stopping and making pickups. Or you're setting out. So the conductor handles all that paperwork. He or she talks to the dispatcher. Sometimes you have to take bulletins over the air, write them down. Although I think nowadays they're doing it with computer and stuff like that. But so it's all the auxiliary work, and so that conductor on the passenger train, he or she is also responsible for all of that, the track bulletins, the speed restrictions. It's much more difficult because that person is also like collecting tickets and trying to maintain order. But you might occasionally hear, the conductor and engineer conversing about a certain restriction, and if the engineer blows by it, violates violates a speed or a work order restriction, that conductor will go down with him, with him or her.
Now, in the freight world, does the conductor ride up in the engine with the engineer?
Yeah, these days, back when I started, when we actually had cabooses, the conductor would ride in the caboose, and then they would communicate via radio. And again, the conductor might be 100 cars away, but the conductor supposed to know where the train is at, and communicate, hey, reminder, you got the speed restriction coming up in 2 miles. you got this work order coming up, and so, and then when the conductor was in the caboose, we had a head brakeman who could do that radio talking. So the engineer, ideally, in the ideal scenario, is the engineer is focused on the mechanics of operating the train, and the other person, back in the day, it was the head brakeman, and nowadays, it's only an engineer and conductor, and the conductor's no caboose, and the conductor rides up in the head end. But there's always somebody doing all that extra auxiliary work that will be, it gives new meaning to task overload if that becomes the work of the engineer
Now, how long
by
does
his or herself.
how long does an engineer work on a train and a conductor or a team? Are they going, are they on that train for only 4 hours one way and then 4 hours back? Or are they going out for days at a time, like a long haul truck driver, and then coming, staying the night somewhere and then coming back? Or how does that work?
There's a combination of, it's kind of like an element of elements and or combinations of all of the above. First of all, the law, we can only work, actually operate the train for 12 hours. Now, so sometimes if you can make your destination from point A to point B and you make it in your 12 hours, or you make it in 10 hours, and then you get relieved by another crew. With the onset of precision scheduled railroading, what they go like here, just go as far as you can for 12 hours, and then we'll put another crew on, and so it used to operate like on different divisions, certain zones. Point A to point B was division A, and point B to point C was division B, and so on and so forth. But it's not unusual to just say go as far as you can go, and then we'll put another crew. You may stop running for 12 hours, and you may be waiting for 4 hours for another crew to relieve you, but you're stuck there. Now, sometimes they actually do try to exchange crews on the fly, where if there's a convenient meeting place, the inbound crew and the outbound crew will stop, and both crews get to actually go home and sleep in their own bed that night. And then the flip side of that, there's getting to be more and more of what we call triangles, where before you would just go from point A to point B, get your rest, and then come back and go point B back to A, your home terminal. But now it's getting to be like over the road trucking in many scenarios, where it's called the triangle, where you go from A to B, lay over, then you go from B to C and lay over, and maybe you make it from C to A, or go back C to B or B to A. So nowadays, in more and more scenarios, road crews can end up, instead of being stuck overnight or for one day, can end up being away from home for several days. So this is happening more and more. You got to pack an extra. You got to pack an extra big grip now.
What are the accommodations like as a railroad employee? When you're an engineer, do you like live and go in a bunkhouse, or hotel, or what?
It's funny you should ask that. Nowadays, it's usually a respectable hotel. Sometimes some are more respectable than others, but when I first started out, and I worked the road a few times, and went to Clinton, Iowa, and they had barracks, literally barracks on the property, and just basically separated by maybe a sheet of drywall. So I mean, you could hear, not only could you hear people in whatever adjacent unit next to you, but they're flat switching. The cars are banging into each other 24/7. If you've ever spent any time near a railroad yard where flat switching is going on, the constant, metal, tons and tons of metal against each other. Needless to say, you weren't going to get much rest there. And the only time you would get to go to a hotel was if the barracks were full. Those days have fortunately passed, but because I started out when I did, I got to experience that. And even then, even when you did get a hotel, you'd have to room with another coworker. And nowadays, you get your own room. So the accommodations are much more civilized today than what they once were.
How can you run a train with one person with all the stuff you're saying that's going on? Can you?
That's the question of questions. I mean, yeah. Right now, there's the rule is in place that that the engineer is not supposed to take any written instructions or do anything while he or she is operating the train. So they would either have to change that rule, or if the engineer had to do some paperwork or take down a bulletin or program something into the computer tablet, they might, to comply with the rule as it currently is, the train would have to be stopped. So in addition, there's so many other reasons why we fear this scenario, but if they succeed in this, and that remains to be seen. They've been going after it now for 10 years on and off, sometimes sometimes subtly and behind the scenes, and sometimes more overtly. But and to our credit, we've managed to hold the line for now. But if they were to succeed, if they were able to get it, then it would be interesting to see what they do with these rules and operating, if they would have to change that.
All right, I guess Charlie's got his hand raised, and then Margaret. So go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah, Mark, it's not a pleasant topic, but I got an email the other day. Somebody was complaining that some union members, and we don't know in what numbers or to what extent, but they like this Trumpism and vote Republican. Do you have any views regarding that, or have you encountered that among personnel and of your union, the rail? Obviously not the Railway Workers United, but in the industry?
I mean, I've encountered it, and I think it's a in fact, I mean, I was kind of horrified. One of these guys that he's actually a local chairman, and in many ways, sometimes he's a very good fighter. He's one of these guys that has always been kind of an effective shop floor fighter. Okay, and that's good. We need that. But unions also need to be more than, if you're forever going to be battling these shop floor skirmishes if you don't take it to a higher level and dig deeper into the political and economic context of why these attacks are happening. And but but I always gave him credit as a good fighter, and he would be very good at the union meetings and educating people about their rights and you know, he knew the contract, like, you know, he could recite the contract, you know, blindfolded in his sleep and all that stuff. On a certain level, I wasn't surprised when it turned out that he was a Trump acolyte. I mean, on a certain, like, on a certain level, I respected him, but I also had many differences with him. He would always challenge, you know, when I would try to push things in a more progressive way. He was on the side of those that would challenge and try to, we're just about shop floor issues. We're not about politics, blah, blah, blah. You know, politics affect everything that happens. But so yeah, and it's so I've experienced it, and I've read some of these other interviews with and it's funny, not funny, but many of these same workers, and this has been borne out by, you know, all these pollsters, but it's been well documented that a very significant layer of these white blue collar workers who voted for Trump also voted for Obama the 2 times before. So it's oversimplifying it to just write them off as racist. And in my opinion, I just my own personal opinion, but I think it's a reflection of how the 2-party system has maintained for so long. You get sick of you get sick of the Republicans, and so you vote for the Democrat. You get sick of the Democrat, and you vote for the Republicans. And many people, I knew many people who could not stomach voting for Hillary Clinton for, you know, combination of reasons. There's no point in getting into that now, but whereas they may have voted for somebody like Sanders. And so Trump was the rebel to the establishment. He passed himself off as, and many workers bought into that. And so it's, it's a real unfortunate phenomenon. And you could really go down a rabbit hole trying to psychoanalyze it. But I think it may be an oversimplification, but I think it does have something to do with the dissatisfaction of the 2-party system. And like I said, many of those workers could have voted for Sanders, and many of those workers might eventually get involved in an independent political party. But right now, that's where we're at.
Okay, Margaret, go ahead. Margaret, you had your hand raised. Go ahead. Unmute.
Okay, Mark, this is slightly off topic, but you're probably the only person I've ever known who worked in a meat packing plant, even for a short period of time. You know, most of our meat packing plants in the South are staffed by people without papers. You know, nobody wants to work in them. I'm a vegetarian, so it doesn't affect me. But today, is it safe? Is this meat really safe to eat? I think of people who eat liver, which is the filtering agent for the body. And this is quite different from growing up on a farm in the 20s and 30s when a person slaughtered a cow or slaughtered a hog. They knew all about the animal, it had been grazing there. But is this stuff coming out of these meat packing plants safe for the general population to be eating? You know, you've seen it firsthand. And here in Texas, we've had outbreaks of COVID among the workers many times because they work in horrible conditions. So what is your opinion?
Well, I mean, you know, my informed opinion has to be qualified that it was probably 1986 when I actually had my experience in the industry. And but I will tell you what though, it was a long time before. And I'm not a big I'm not a vegetarian, but I'm also you know, not a super red meat consumer. I try to limit my red meat. I try to be reasonably healthy and all that stuff. I mean, I like a slab of ribs here and there, you know, but try to keep it to a minimum. You know, that's kind of a sinful treat. But I'll tell you what, when I saw, and there were inspectors occasionally, you know, they'd, you know, oh, inspectors here today, and I saw some really bad stuff to the point that you know, like for instance, diseased animals that were supposed to be put off to the side.
Yeah.
You know, if they could get them on, if they could get them up the chute and on the hook, they'd run them.
Yeah.
And because you didn't want to be the one, you didn't want to be the one to you know, say, hey, this can't go. Even though you're well within your right, and even though that's your job, and even though you may be in a union, you know, that's going to be a lose-lose proposition.
And you know, among poor people who eat a lot of chicken, their little kids mature much earlier than they should be maturing, because those chickens, unless they're organic, are pumped full of hormones to make them fat. And
Yeah.
Mark, I mean, it's just a horrible thing. And so many times the diets of our poorer people are based on cheap.
They don't use hormones. Okay, I have questions.
Okay, Lana, go ahead.
Thank you. So may I ask, what kind of job did you do in railroad for these 5 years? You said you was working. What kind of job? Like driver, engineer? You know,
Yeah.
my pop, you know, I come from Europe. So my pop was working in railroad architecture and construction more than 38 years before we came to this country, like Jewish immigrants. So I'm very familiar. When I saw railroad, wow, I like it. So, but it's different here than in Europe, you know, railroad. So this is my question. What did you do? What kind of job you do? You was conductor or driver? Or
Engineering, Lana.
Okay, I'm listening. Thank you.
Yeah, the bulk of my career, with the exception of my first year, I was an engineer.
And doing what, like engineer with like
Driving,
fixing?
yeah, right. Locomotive engineer, driving the train, either in the yard or over the road.
Okay, one more question, if I may. How, I mean, what if train going from one destination to another and then it stopped because it's not well enough? Oh, what are you doing? How did you, where did you find the oil to filled with oil? Because you know, what if, oh, by the way, did you work on cargo, how to say cargo railroad, or with yeah, or with trains? This is my question.
Run. Yeah, I didn't quite get it. Run that by me one more time.
My question is, first of all, did you work for cargos, for cargos train, or for train with passengers?
Oh, right. Yeah, I've always worked in freight. I worked on passenger trains a couple times, but 98% of my experience was with freight.
With what?
With cargo. With cargo.
With cargo. And this kind of question, if you may, if you can answer, about what if it's train going, and then stop because it's no oil, or how to say engine. No, wait. I speak another language. I try to speak English. What if train going, and for my understanding, like train also need oil, right, to go. So what if it's not oil enough? So how you manage? So you order immediately, so they immediately help you, and it's like wait, I try to speak English. Find this word. Helper, like help train, like emergency train and generation, or it's like working on an electricity or an oil. Please, can you tell me? Because it's a different culture. Thank you. I'm sorry. I try not to be difficult. So my just question, what is train going, and stop for a second. And it's engine not working for some reason. So what is it? What do you do? Like how you fixing? Like it's oil or on electricity basis? So how you fixing and continue this train driving? Thank you. I try not to be difficult.
The best shot I can give at this is back in the old days where things were more mechanical. If we had
Really?
problems,
More
we could.
mechanical? I guess it's now more mechanical.
No, now everything's computer. So used to be if you part of learning the trade was learning all the little tricks of how to fix this and how to fix that. If it were something that didn't require complete disassembly and a massive chest. But now with everything computerized, if something goes wrong, if something goes wrong, forget it.
But you have help immediately. Those train have help immediately to come and fix it, or need to put on the side and offer passengers like shuttle train or something. You know why I'm asking? Because I travel so much in Russia, very much. You know, around Russia, and around the Europe. And we never, maybe we was lucky, and I don't know, but we never ever had trouble or problem with railroad. It was working so smooth, so nice. So that's what I kind of spoiled by railroad from Europe. But I guess I travel here by Amtrak and I forgot, metro. Excellent. I like it. I like very much. So I travel here from Rogers Park area to the, let's see, to Buffalo Grove and to Highland Park to visit. And then they picked me up, relatives or acquaintances, and then we went to shopping, you know. And then they bring back to me to train station. It was pretty good, but it's so
I have
different.
a question.
Yeah, so that's what my question. I'm satisfied with your answer. Thank you so much.
All right, Charlie, go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah, sir, on Thursday at the other college, I spoke about how my union, we won an election and we organized employees in 6 southern states, which was rather unusual. What explanation can you give? You're forming a nationwide political party, but there appears to be an awful lot of sentiment out there against the organized labor movement, in particularly the South and in states like Texas and Indiana, where Bob Matter comes from, except for the northern portion, where the people have some degree of sanity. But what explanation, how do we counter this? And in rural areas, this culture of anti-unionism, which seems to be so prevalent.
I mean, and again, it's just my personal opinion, but this is it is a real problem, and in my opinion, the only way. This is why it's a life and death question for the unions to to take more progressive positions, to actively engage in the movements for social justice. Um, uh, this gets back to the conflict that I would constantly have with this one particular local chairman. Like I said, good fighter on the shop floor, but he didn't want to have anything to do with what I was talking about. And so how are you going to win allies? Because ultimately labor, especially rail labor, will never be able to win a real pitched battle without the public support. Railroad Workers United understands that, and as much as we try to educate and inspire our own peers and co-workers, we also reach out to the public because we know that we're going to need allies when the showdown comes over the single employee crew. We know we're going to need allies, and so I like to think of what we do in RWU as kind of a microcosm of what the rail union should be doing, but also what unions, what labor in general should be doing, which is to reach out to the layers of society who are dispossessed, who are frustrated, whether it, over all the injustices, because that's where the fighters are. And our fights in labor for dignity is part of the fight for social justice. And the challenge is for rank and file labor to realize that and to actively seek out and make those alliances. And until that happens, until that happens on a bigger scale, we're going to be vulnerable to that. Labor ultimately has to be part of the leadership for social justice, and without that, without grabbing that bull by the horns, then we're vulnerable to this kind of anti-labor sentiment, in my opinion.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so did you say, are you part of the Teamsters or are you part of a broader coalition? Wouldn't that be a way to, and I guess I'm interested in kind of like what Charlie was getting at, why I think I know there's a kind of neoliberal lobby with a lot of ability to influence public opinion against labor and the left. And I don't know, I'm always trying to think of a way that, we can stop that lobbying. Actually, there was a law in 1913 that government is not allowed to do lobbying or public relations, but because they do, they've got Citizens United is given Koch brothers, and there's just, this whole neoliberal war against it. And so I don't know, do y'all do lobbying, public relations, coalition building?
Just to answer your first question, we're really not, we're not affiliated with the Teamsters. We're not a union. We're an activist caucus of workers within the 13 different rail unions, trying to push that, that if we can't be all one union, which is we're trying to pick up where Eugene Debs left off with the American Railway Union and organizing rail workers into one union. But until that can happen, which, there's so many bureaucracies and jurisdictional, at least to act as one, and if we act as one, the the actual form it takes is not as important, whether it's 13 unions or one union, if we can act as one. And so we try to, we have people in our different unions, in the conductors union, in the engineers union, in the maintenance of way union, in the different crafts unions, all kind of trying to push this same agenda from within to the rank and file, to the low and mid-level leaderships, and we even push our agenda to the international presidents, and we feel that we're a force to be reckoned with. We have a tremendous hearing. We have tremendous respect. At one time, like, I mean, we have, like, I can't remember. I'm not that active on our Facebook page, but I've heard that from other people who are that there have been thousands and thousands. We have a following. People listen to us. We don't have any real power, so to speak, except for our moral authority and the leadership that we try to assert. As far as the whole lobbying, I mean, we don't really actively engage in lobbying, but when something is really big, if there's something really big, we'll encourage, here, write your congressman type thing. But we just try to speak. We just try to speak the truth to our memberships and allies. And
why not be part of a Teamsters or AFL, CIO, any of those broader labor union? Is that not considered, or?
I mean, at this point in time, I mean, what Debs tried to do with the American Railway Union was to recruit the workers from all the different railroad unions, and at its peak, the American Railway Union actually had more than half of the rail workers in the American Railway Union in his quest to organize all the rail workers into one union. 100+ years later, all these unions have protective jurisdictional verbiage. To try to do something like that at this point in time with our meager resources is just not realistic. Trust me, I would love to do the American Railway Union Part 2. And that's my own personal opinion, and I know that's shared, but with the lay of the land, what it is today, it's just not realistic. And so with our meager resources, we just try to get our truth out, tell the truth to our coworkers, tell the truth to the public, and try to do the best we can, and just resist the rail carriers and the government that enables them every which way we can.
As I said to the team on Thursday, I recommend people watch Walter Reuther documentary showing how brutal the thugs were that go after the unions, and the Debs documentary. I growing up in the South, I'm kind of like Margaret, that I tended to we're kind of brainwashed into thinking that it's, all communism, workers, labor, it's terrible. And maybe they ought to push, like the way curriculums are, not like history doesn't honestly give a real story about the unions and the way management. And I noticed Bob posted the National Review articles. They've got 4 articles just smearing, unions and Democrats and socialists. And I think we have to stop that National Review from doing that, especially given that they were started by the CIA with James Burnham and the funding that came from the CIA. So just, I think we got to sue them, go after all these violations of communications law.
Just real briefly. I don't think we'll, rather than shut down the review, the way I see it is to challenge and counter. So sometimes we'll get these pro-company articles in Railway Age that siren going by that will promote that advocate for engineer-only single employee crew, and we'll take that and we'll rebut it. Here, this is what. But the other point I just want to make, with the whole anti-union thing, a lot of things come out in the wash when people struggle. A lot of biases, a lot of prejudices, a lot of misconceptions. When people get out on the picket line and things become much clearer, and I am confident that in spite of these problems, which are real, that you and others have cited, I am confident that as we struggle and as we resist, if we can combine that with civilized engagement and debate and discussion, that we can overcome these differences, because many of them are just so surface level and shallow, and based on the foundation is no more solid than a house of cards, and when we can take that on, and we just have to keep any chance we get.
Yeah, one idea, I learned a lot running for office about organizing, and community organizing and campaign organizing are kind of the same thing. So I think you should run. Why not? Just whoever will get you on the ballot. I think, why not? Have you ever considered that?
Well, as long as you ask, actually I have, and somewhere down the line, it's something I have contemplated. I think the signature requirements are overwhelming to just try to run as an independent, which is something. But as long as you ask, I before my time is up, I would like to take a run at running for Congress at an independent. I think it's like you'd almost need like 20,000 signatures on a petition. They make it very difficult for anybody independent of the two parties to run, and that's but as long as you asked, it's on my bucket list. So I don't know. So,
yeah,
thank you for the encouragement.
Even just because I almost could have been on the Green Party ticket, because they made the case that there was a kind of not a level playing field with the pandemic and all this. And so at least you kind of start going, look how uneven it is, the way the incumbent, has all the phone numbers and all the money and all the, and how does a new person get in? So I'm kind of an independent too, but I was willing to be on any party. This People's one sounds very interesting, because I know Chris Hedges I was almost on the Green Party. He was supposed to be on the Green Party ticket for Congress one day, and the next day he said he's not. And I looked at it, and he said, because they told him he'd have to give up his TV, his internet news show. And I don't have his phone number, but I wanted to call him and say, you don't have to give up your news show. Trump is on Fox News every day. If he does, if they do want that, we need to sue them. Look at this uneven playing field and that's what this thing needs to be regulated, these elections, not just like the one with the most money has their own platform, their own party, no platform. It's just the Trump or the Clinton party. It is so corrupt. We need to gather, unionize, and sue. They need to regulate elections. That's what the Federal Election Commission's all about. But it's like at this point, it seems like all the politicians just go, it's crazy. Trump does whatever he wants. The Dems and the rest of us are just losing our public estate. And so, but I think you've got a big coalition being in the union, and I'm Ellen Corley, look at me. I could help you get the mail-in list and stuff like that. And, you could get signatures it is unfair the way it is, but we all need to run. That's the only way to take on these tyrants.
And it's going to take it with this issue and with so many others. It's going to take a mass movement, and we're going to have to organize that and work amongst ourselves and collaborate, find our common ground, work together, find the common ground, and where we don't have common ground, agree to disagree, and we'll deal with that later, and find the common ground that we can fight together on. And there's a lot of it, but it's going to take the mass involvement of people for all these issues that we're facing, and including running for office and getting people like us. Why shouldn't you or myself, and so
everybody should run.
I'll debate most of them in a heartbeat,
That'd be the whole reason to do it, just to get them on the debate stage. And,
Right.
And hear the people clapping for a real person, an outsider, a real person, the person's party.
And come at them with facts and real life experiences rather than, so.
It's,
okay, let's
they're
move on.
feudalists, there's feudalism.
All right.
They're monarchs.
Okay, we got some more people with questions, Ellen, I know. Jan Lee, you want to go next, and then we'll go with Charlie. Jan, you want to go next?
Yeah, okay, so I think my initial question was partly answered about the Labor Day, not on May 1st, but September. I'm still not really clear why it is in September, and if there's any movement, any plans to move this Labor Day to May 1st, so it is more in line with the original intent and the international May Labor Day. That's my first question. And my second question is about union. Is there a kind of federal union? Is union stronger or weaker now than, say, 10, 20 years ago? Are there plans, are there strategies to make unions stronger, and how we can help to make unions stronger?
The first question, unfortunately, there is no real any real organized attempt at this point in time to champion, Labor Day reverting back to May Day in line with the working class around the world, and to celebrate the struggle of workers right here in Chicago for the 8-hour day. But that's why it's so noteworthy and significant. To whatever extent May Day protests, demonstrations, rallies do happen, it keeps that alive, but there's no real you know, unfortunately, there's no real significant motion at this point in time. But to the next question, before I get to the next question, and I'm just kind of, this kind of dovetails into what was mentioned previously. It kind of jives. We're not taught our history. We're not taught this history, and the only reason, whatever I have learned, I've learned and or experienced on my own. I've sought it out, and so we're not. The whole Labor Day thing was the working class was up in arms about the working class was very much in solidarity with the Pullman strike, with Debs and the American Railway Union, and it was not pretty how it was ended, and so it was kind of a bone by President Cleveland and the head of the union, the AFL at the time, to try to placate the workers, because they were very resentful of how the whole Pullman strike went down, the violence initiated by the government, and so it was literally to like placate, to give them, throw them a bone, but to your other question about the strength of unions, I mean, on a certain level, numerically, numerically, the number of organized workers in unions has declined. We're in single digits, where it was in like, in the 60s, it was something like 30+%, and now we're in single digits. But I don't look at that statistic, because at a certain point, workers, whether they're in unions or not, I mean, look at Amazon. Look at the Amazon workers. They're not in unions right now, so they don't count as part of, so you can say, organized labor, there's only 9%, 8% of the workforce, whatever statistic it is, that's in organized unions, and you can say, oh, that's pathetic. But yet, what if all these, what if all these non-organized, non-unionized workers were to not show up at Amazon? Power is power. Everybody who works as part of the productive process has tremendous economic and political power. Being part of an organized union makes it easier to exercise that, but it's not a requirement, and so those Amazon workers could be among the most powerful workers in the country today, if they recognized and exercised that power, even without being in a union. So how do we get stronger? Through struggle, through helping the struggles that are going on, the Nabisco workers on strike, these coal miners in Alabama, helping them, building solidarity with them, helping them. If one of these, if the Nabisco workers can win, that builds momentum and inspiration for the next workers. It's a, how we rebuild the labor movement it's going to be through struggle and ultimately solidarity within the working class that helps to gain some victories and start pushing back. And once we gain some momentum, who knows where it could go? That's just my opinion.
I checked the People's Party website, and it looks really good. I think if the People's Party could be more well-known, and to kind of attract people from our works to participate, it can be a political force to counter the two-party system, but it doesn't seem to be well known. Like I didn't know until now. I don't know if there are like some strong leaders from that People's Party could give more voice, get more interviews, have some kind of agenda to and lobby. Do they have a lobby in Washington, D.C.? If there are a lot of lobbyists, and if you really want to expand your power, you have to have some kind of lobby representations. Otherwise, no one knows about you.
Just on that, my personal opinion is, I mean, yeah, it's a new development. They're struggling to trying to develop themselves and trying to get that recognition. There's talk. There was talk about having a demonstration at the Capitol. I'm not sure where that's going to go, but yes, I mean, this is the challenge for a third party, for an independent political party to stay afloat long enough while you, because it's person to person. It takes a real dogged effort to even just get out and get known. And the challenge is to just remain afloat long enough while that window's open to see if that can happen. And so that's the struggle they and any independent entity is going to face. And we'll see where it goes.
See, there is a Teamsters has a railroad safety. They've got a division of 70,000 railroad workers, but more for maintenance and stuff, right? Are you aware of that? Or
well, yeah.
And that's just
the Teamsters actually. They actually, both the Maintenance of Way Union and the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers are kind of part of the Teamsters is kind of a mothership type conference, and so they're part of that.
But you're not. Why isn't your group part of that?
Well, we're not a union. I mean, we're not a union. We're an activist. We're an activist caucus trying to challenge all the established unions to fight more effectively for our safety and dignity.
Yeah. How many people are in your association?
It comes and goes and fluctuates. I'd say active dues paying members, we have a few hundred.
Right.
But
and so
we have thousands of followers. We have thousands of followers who read our newspaper and follow us online. But as far as actual dues paying members, I'd say it's a few hundred.
Right. It seems like being so divided, that's how the managers, I was recommend the Managers Revolution, or was James Burnham, who was National Review's original guy in the 30s. But the idea of the Managers Revolution is really why everybody's got to be a union and unite. Even those of us who aren't in unions, we got to somehow consider ourselves one big union against the managers, because the managers are against the unions. But they're invisible kind of, and they've got us atomized and separated and without any, I don't know, it'd probably be hard to get everybody to stay home someday, or like think about this. Did you hear in Chicago, the guys that drive the buses are because they don't want to wear masks, they are suddenly out of a job, and each family gets $1,000 to take a Uber. They don't mention that it's I've heard that Rahm Emanuel has a big stake in Uber, and so it's like, look at how, there's no solidarity in terms of union, around everybody together against this, the managers, this kind of invisible cabal that is really designed to kill all of us, and any revolutions we might want to struggle for. I just don't see the numbers. I'm a market research analyst. It's like, how do you aggregate that numbers? I think there's got to be maybe join a union, join the Teamsters. I don't know, just a thought,
Mark, I'm curious if you have anything good to say about corporations or our capitalistic system.
Well, I would say that at one point, long time ago, what you refer to as the capitalist system helped to develop our productive forces. And there are certainly, there's going to be certainly some people critical of that viewpoint. But the Industrial Revolution doesn't happen, without capitalism. My opinion is that whatever they contributed at one point to the development has run its course, and you look at what we're facing today. I mean, the destruction of the environment, the wealth inequality, the never-ending wars, which are competition for resources, competition against different countries. So in my opinion, whatever positive things capitalism may have brought at one point in time, I believe that's run its course. And just with the way the state of the world and what's happening today, that's just my own personal opinion.
Mark?
Right, go ahead, Chuck.
All right, the first full expression of free market capitalism in the United States was the transportation, the railroad industry, the railroads. A lot of people don't realize that at one time in the beginning, the only stocks that were traded on Wall Street were railroad stocks. Also, I think a strong argument could be made that the very worst employers have always been the railroads. Isn't the real problem free market capitalism?
I mean, again, if you, my personal opinion, I wouldn't object to that assessment. My personal opinion. I would agree with you on that.
I mean, there appears to be inherent flaws to free market capitalism. If in its purest expression, has done nothing good for the people, well, then we got to get rid of it.
Well,
Romanka.
Well, can I jump
Ой,
in?
слушай, не надо на меня наезжать, потому что ты же знаешь, ты, наверное,
There's
забыла.
no perfect system.
У меня телефон,
Because,
мне-то
because
все
the
понятно,
limitation
но
of
телефон у меня кривой, понимаешь?
um,
Значит, быстро я скажу, что я хотела, я понимаю,
sometimes
что
when we talk about systems, whether it's capitalism or socialism, it's just a
я все
label.
понимаю.
Elena needs to
Нет,
mute.
пожалуйста, меня
Yeah.
Mute,
послушай.
Elena.
Просто я выскажу свое мнение.
Tim, will you
Хочешь,
mute her?
Her,
хочешь,
can we
не
miss?
соглашайся. И этот опять-таки разговор только confidential. Да, моя дорогая, between you and me, потому что ты у меня умник.
Okay. Yeah. So I come back to say, when we just talk about isms, it's just not, it cannot cover the real picture. There are many forms of capitalism, there are more forms of socialism, and there's no perfect system, right? Because our human beings are flawed. Because we're flawed, we cannot really like expect a perfect system. So we can only talk about what works and what not working. What works in capitalism, what's not working in capitalism. What's working in socialism, what's not working in socialism. And how we can adjust and find the best in capitalism and best in socialism, and for them to get kind of like, for them, it's not like we don't have a pure capitalism. China doesn't have a pure socialism or communism. That's just not such a thing. There is a pure system. So being more analytical, we just have to find out what elements that worked or that's still working, that elements that are out of date. Maybe someday someone can make a presentation about elements that in capitalism worked before but not working now, and what needs to be adjusted. Socialism in Europe is different from socialism in China. Some people think China is communism, but actually it's socialism, but it has a one-party system. Capitalism in the United States is different from Canada. Canada is Canada socialism or capitalism, maybe like half and half, right? So we just have to kind of like find out what things that still work and what things that don't work, and how we can make adjustment to make it work. That's kind of general, but I don't have something too specific and controversial to say, but I'm just thinking that we need to move beyond the label and to be specific about things that are working and things that are not working. And there's no perfect system. The system here is not perfect. There's, I think Canada, Northern Europe probably have better system, and what we can learn from them.
In
Yeah,
1797, Eli Whitney set up the first assembly line. Are you telling me that's a system you think that works?
I don't know. I don't know about that
The assembly
particular
line?
incident, but I'm thinking in general, there are things that worked before, but that don't work now. There are things, probably there are things working well now, but are some things that need to be adjusted. I just don't think there is like a perfect system that we have to argue about.
I think you got about the worst system you could design. You go ahead and ask somebody on an assembly line, hey, you like this?
I'd like to respond real quickly.
Go right ahead.
I actually agree with a lot of what you said. And the most important that I feel very strongly about is I try to stay away from labels. Okay.
Yeah.
Because one person's S word means this, and to another person it means that. And so forget about the labels. Because it's not a common language, for one. Okay. And it can be counterproductive. What I prefer is to discuss the content, just the content of what we're up against. Does it have to be this way? Could there be a better way? And it's just about justice. What's just? What's right? What's fair? So forget the isms. What I do like to focus on is the question of democracy. Okay. Is this really a democracy that, okay, you can go every November and vote for Clinton or Trump, but is it really a democracy? And that's why I have always felt strongly about an independent political party that can galvanize the vast majority of us. And as far as, the humans are flawed, we're not perfect. Okay, fair enough. But if the question is if the fundamental question posed is, should society and the wealth that we create, should we, the vast majority of us, benefit from that wealth that we create, or should it go into the pockets and bank accounts of what's getting to be more and more a tiny handful? I mean, the statistics become more and more obscene of X amount, these 5 people own half of the world's wealth. It's just obscene. And so instead of the isms, I just prefer to pose the question, should society be run in a more just, in a more humane manner? And the vast majority of people, if you pose that question, would say, well, yeah, of course. Okay, well, how do we make that happen? Then it gets to be a bit more, complicated. But as far as, humans being flawed, I really believe that if we really had democratic institutions where we were able to, do we feel that every human being is entitled to the best possible health care, irregardless of their wealth? Do we feel that every human being is entitled to the best possible education and opportunities? I believe that most people are fair and righteous minded, and that collectively we could debate and discuss and find righteous solutions to our problems. And if we make a mistake here and there, okay, we might make a mistake, but eventually we'll catch it and correct it. It may sound oversimplified and idealistic, but I just go back to Deb's. Deb's just articulated the vision for a just, humane world, I've just always been convinced of that, and I believe that humanity is capable of that. It's just going to be a struggle to get there.
I agree with you in the big picture, but the devil is in the details, as they say. Even the concept of democracy and justice may be interpreted a little bit differently. I think it's a Fareed Zakaria who wrote a book, Illiberal Democracy at Home and Abroad. So there is liberal democracy and there's illiberal democracy. And to what extent that we run into illiberal democracy, and to what extent democracy can be hijacked, and voters don't really like being misled to vote against their own interest. These are all possibilities. So it's the details about what is the real democracy. If you want to talk about like more unambiguous statements or struggles, it would have to be more detailed, more precise. For example, minimum wage, $15. I'm for it. I think people who work should be able to live like a minimally decent life, like $15 or even $20 for that matter. So if we go to that much detail, there's not too much like misreading out. There could be, anything can be misread, but the concept of democracy and justice, as to some extent, it's a loaded word, but details like minimum wage, then we say, are you for $15 minimum wage? And why are you for, why are you against? That has less ambiguity.
We say we go to rebuttals, Timmy.
I think it's a good idea. We go to rebuttals now. I've been working on a good one myself with all these
Let's
lefties in
thank
the
our
audience
speaker.
today. All right, let's thank our speaker. Mark, you did a nice job tonight. I appreciate all the history of the railroads and the history of the unions and everything else. And I think you guys are absolutely preposterous that capitalism's not delivering the goods. As a matter of fact, it just confirms my own views that Marxism and the communist ideology is starting to fuel the left. And Ellen, you're going to love this rebuttal, but I'm not going to go quite yet. So now, if we have a rebuttal, we're going to give everybody about 4 or 5 minutes, depending on who wants to go first. Ellen, would you like to go first on a rebuttal? You usually have a lot to say. John or Mike, Vicky, you'll get the last word, Mark.
I'll go. Yeah, I always.
All right, Ellen, go ahead. You got your 4 to 5 minutes, so go ahead.
All right. Well, I am glad to see a socialist or, a social contract mentioned today. Thank you for your talk. I spend a lot of time thinking about how to bring back the social contract. Regarding Gian's question, 40 years ago, we were more of a balanced, kind of like Canada system. We were regulated. The neoliberals starting in the 30s, but really before that, but they, the Republican Party, the right-wing extremists came up with an idea of monetarism. And, Milton Friedman, Ayn Rand, objectivism, Alan Greenspan, and they pushed capitalism, give all the power to capitalism and the capital come trickling down, follow man's mind. And really what's needed, I learned in business school, I was kind of brainwashed in that. But in business school, I learned, you really want all 4 stakeholders. The managers, the owners, the consumers, and the managers. I'm like that guy in Dallas. What is the 4th one? But to really have all stakeholders influencing the process, and that is really any corporation you got your micro, you want it to work like a family, you want it to be functional, you want it to be fair. All the research supports the idea that, a happy family with benefits and social ideals and progressive ideals works, and management, that listens to those, listens to the consumer, listens to the employees, listens to the managers, listens to the owners. That's the best way. It took me a while to see that the problem with just owners being the only stakeholder, the stock market, the CEOs, the Jeffrey Zuckerbergs, they're not listening. They have this technocracy. This is not democracy. And it used to be that consumerism and democracy went together, but now I was looking at Michael Parenti's Democracy for the Few. He deals with all the different domains and justice and just every respect. If it's only the owners that have the control, the power, and they're not listening to what we want, what we've got is, a world where, they're going to take away abortion rights, they're going to take away school rights, healthcare rights, and I know my stepfather was like this. He really didn't believe in social justice or rights. He was like, what's social justice? And his parents were German Nazis, so they just didn't teach him about that. And I luckily was raised in a Christian family in Georgia, long-standing Republicans, but they've been Democrats with Kennedy, but, just fair and reasonable people. And, we're all fair and reasonable people, but little do we know, we don't have any power. And that's my argument with Tim. I'd be like, we're powerless. That's my best hope. I was at an AA meeting today, and they start with, we are powerless. We have to just kind of first look at that, and rather than be angry, just kind of go, be humble, don't get angry, because that kind of gets in the way. And but assertive, and we got to stand up for our rights. And I'm learning to be a feminist. We have to really and acknowledge that there is there's really kind of a police state, and there's no doubt about it. But it's invisible, and that's what's scary. So I don't know I assume you're from China or somewhere like that, but we need to actually, it'd be interesting to really, I studied Chinese at Colgate in 1973 with Chris Hedges. I was there at the same time. And we had to take a course in another culture, and they were just becoming capitalist. And, they've done so much a better job than we have. But yet, because of the bad PR, it's like we're trying to wage a war on them, just like we are Russia. Russia, we used to learn a lot from. And, if you look at, kind of the way the open-minded John Deweys and Democrats of, the Debs types in the 30s and 40s or whenever, they were open-minded toward this, rather than right now, all the money's going into the war machine. That's something nice that Tracy and we're working on divesting from that. But they've got 35% of the budget for biological warfare, like this virus. That's why I've spent a lot of time. This was made at Fort Detrick, because Fauci and Gates have the patents on it. They've had it since the 90s. Go right in there with the AIDS. They engineer these things. It's called bioengineering, biowarfare. All the writers write about it, but it gets erased and censored because Zuckerberg and those guys have all the power. As Hitler said, once he had the media, big lies were easy. He won the whole game. That's where we're at now. That's all I got. Thank you.
All right, Jeanne, your rebuttal, you got your hand up, and go ahead.
Okay, so you can hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you. I'm going to lower your hand and
okay.
Go ahead and give you a rebuttal.
Okay. First, I admire our speaker, Mark, Idealism, I think we need to have idealism, and we need to have champions for workers, and we need to have diversity of voices. So different interests can be represented. And I do think workers, their voices cannot to be well represented because they don't have as much money, capital, leadership, strong leadership to represent them. So I'm glad there are people who still have very strong idealism and want to speak up for the working people. Secondly, I think capitalism has its merit, encourages creativity, competition, but unchecked, unbridled capitalism can create a lot of conflicts, inequality. The money talks. If money is concentrated in the hands of small minority, the opinions we hear can be skewed towards the rich and powerful. So in that sense, I can see both the merit and the danger of capital being concentrated in a small minority, right? I mean, in general, I think it is important to hear different opinions and ideas, so we are not close-minded and we can pick and choose what might be a better solution to the complex problems we have. Okay.
All right, Charlie, you want to go next? All right, Charlie, you can go next. And then, or Bob, do you want to go before Charlie?
All right, I'll go.
All right, Charlie, I'll lower your hand and Bob Matter will go
Okay,
next.
first of all, I'd like to thank our speaker for being our special Labor Day speaker. Covered a lot of topics here and a very important topic, possibly the most important topic. I'll be eclectic as usual, and I will cover 6 areas. First of all, to me, the purest expression of free market capitalism is the assembly line. One thing I want to tell you about the assembly line, employers don't like to have information available to the general workforce regarding the line speed. They try to keep that information clandestine because they'll really manipulate it. Anyhow, I don't think any system that incorporates using employees as robotic features is one that I can embrace. There's no way to make I don't care about Western Electric and management studies. There's no way to make assembly line activities meaningful. There's been this, as I said, just forget about it. It isn't going to work. They tried setting up work teams or what have you, but it didn't prove to be successful. And there simply is no means of improving on that. Okay, the next thing is Bob didn't quite understand what a conductor is actually the individual in charge of a train. And a train isn't like point A to point B. There's pickups and there's deliveries, there's routes and stops and starts. He has a crew. Cars have to be dispatched and picked up. And the conductor is the individual who's in fact in charge of the train. You may not realize it. You may think the guy in your commuter trains collecting tickets, but he actually is the one who gives instructions to the guy running the engine, among the other personnel maybe on that vehicle. The thing about the thing about communists and unions and May Day is that a lot of people don't realize in the 1950s, There was considerable thing to purge the unions. The unions were accused of being communist organizations. I am often brought to my attention by my associates, because I'm an outspoken socialist and communist, that according to the nationwide agreement of the union I'm in fact work for, that communists cannot be a member of the organization. It dates back to the 50s, someplace in labor law, but it's been a feature of nationwide contracts and you can still find it. But anyhow, the other thing that happened is it also had a terrible effect upon the organized labor movement, is that possibly the best organizers, who were these socialists, the organizations removed them. And it certainly had a dampening effect on the overall movement. It's considered by some to be the thing that caused some real issues and why the movement is not as widespread as perhaps it should be today. Regarding May Day itself, for many, many years at the College of Complexes, on May Day, we performed a play called Cell 29, which I edited, regarding the event at Haymarket. We sort of just got tired of doing it every year, but we did keep the memory alive here at the College of Complexes as terms of May Day and its origins. If you want more information on the Haymarket event, I recommend the website of the Illinois Labor History Society, which has extensive information at its website. But nevertheless, every year at the college, we always have, and for many years, as long as I can remember, recognize May Day as a day dedicated to discussing issues of employment. I heard a little bit here about political parties. I've been affiliated with the Green Party since its inception. I can tell you three things that regarding this, that there are issues regarding third parties. The first one that right now is ballot access, getting on the ballot itself. The second real issue is finding qualified candidates. We find, I'm sorry, we have people seeking to serve as our candidates are simply not qualified to occupy an office in the government. I cite the example of the woman we interviewed who wanted to run a campaign that God was angry with the United States and was punishing the nation. There's something like that. And the other thing is, and I don't have an answer to this, the third parties have never been able to get support from the voters. I mean, maybe 1, 3, 5, 10%. We did very well in the Green Party. We won presidential campaign, which is about the only singular achievement. But outside of that, there seems to be some reticence on the part of the voters, and they're easy to blame, so why not blame them, you know? Last of all, regarding organized labor in general, there was some talk of quote reform. We talk about this all the time, union officials among themselves. What direction should we do? I've sat through endless number of meetings on this. Right now, there is legislation called the PRO Act, which is to correct some of the issues, that impediments to organizing. There's been other manifestations of this, Free Employee, Free Choice Act, and any other versions of that. Yeah, incrementally, we do need, there is difficult to organize a union, and the employers have gotten very good at this. Law firms exist entirely to combat any organized movement. They'll delay. You have to be real tenacious and put a lot of effort in it because they will pose and countless number of obstacles and challenges to, you know, I'm amazed sometimes, and they will stop at nothing, no expense whatsoever. They will do anything possible to preclude. Sometimes I'm amazed from having an organized workforce. The other thing that needs to be done, and returning to the problem of free market capitalism, I see a real problem with free market capitalism since beginning around the 80s, the disparity between the rich and the poor has made the United States the worst social stratification among any country I can think of. I even gave a lecture on this at the college. The CEO averages, depending on who you look to, sometimes they earn 385 times more than the average employee in the company. We were talking about Nabisco. The woman in charge of that company earns an amazing 534 times more money than the average employee in the company. Now, to say, well, is there a problem here? Yes, that kind of comes to mind that, yeah, that doesn't seem right. I don't know, but and say, yeah, I don't like isms. Yeah, that kind of ism I don't like at all. Anyhow, thanks a lot, sir. I enjoyed your talk, and please come again and give us an update on direction or RWU and what you. Thank you.
All right, Bob, you're up next.
Okay, I hope Ellen Connolly's in hearing distance of this. She mentioned women's right to abortion. I don't know where she gets that from. I don't see anywhere in the Constitution guaranteeing anybody the right to kill another life, another human. Matter of fact, the 14th Amendment, I believe, says that we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So the fetus also has a right to life. Who is protecting that person's right? And it has to be us. So that's that. Also, Connolly and I think maybe others made reference to all the war machine and how we spend a third of our budget on it and blah, blah, blah. Well, that is one of the purposes of government. I mean, that is one of the legitimate functions of government. That's what I want my government to spend its money on, is on the national defense, on police, on the court system, and protecting my rights. That's what government is for. As a matter of fact, you look at the horrible job we've done in Afghanistan under Biden, this miserable withdrawal we've had. Of course, the Chinese are just eating this up now. The Chinese, have a border on Afghanistan, and they are now going to be poised to essentially have their mitts on all the lithium that's there.
Copper and rare earths.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. So we just handed that all over to China because they're gonna bargain with the Taliban, and they're gonna get access to all those resources. So yeah, this I don't know. I'm so upset about the Biden thing, but that's just not his only failure. But a good point here to bring up is that about Mark said, well, why are people voting for like Trump? Well, geez, how do you like what we got now? How do you like having your currency debauched? The thing is, this is never good for working people. They always say unions, and Democrats are, to help working people, but it always ends up hurting them. I mean, go take a look at Detroit. I was in Detroit a couple of years ago for a conference, and I got a firsthand view of Detroit post the great automobile era, the heyday. And I don't live far from Gary. I live in Hammond, Indiana. So I'm in close contact with Gary. And that's another, city and industry that's been destroyed, the steel industry, by unions, typically because of wages that outstrip production. Companies can't afford it. They start closing plants down. They start moving plants offshore and blah blah blah. And so what ends up happening is these union guys, then they lose their jobs. Then then all the surrounding businesses go down with them. So that's, I don't see how joining a union helps do anything other than destroy yourself. I guess if you have a death wish, I guess you would join a union, because they will then, you'll be out of a job soon and won't be able to get a job anywhere else, because your job will have left the country or have been automated out of existence. I'm trying to think of anything I might.
I've got a short rebuttal, Bob.
Hey, Bob, what if the boss wants to give your job to his son?
That's his prerogative. Oh yeah, speaking of that now, Charlie, Charlie is, again, talking about, his envy of these people that make more money than him. Well, because these people have brought more value somewhere along the line, or one of their relatives did, and maybe they're enjoying that. But the reason Steve Bezos, or what's his name, Bezos from Amazon, Amazon makes so much money because they're satisfying demands of the marketplace. People like picking up they're getting on their computer and pushing a couple buttons and having their appliance delivered, in 2 hours with free shipping.
So the CEOs have attributes that I am lacking, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. They added all that value. Look at, all these guys, these billionaires that you're so envious of. They brought huge value to the market. People give them their money because people feel they're getting a better deal. That the product.
What does the person on the assembly line do? They don't create any wealth, right? Labor creates.
No, they create wealth, but they get paid.
Guy on the assembly line.
What's that?
Really?
Yeah, I mean,
that woman in charge of Nabisco doesn't bake one cookie.
Some guy that's got an IQ of 104.
He doesn't bake one cookie.
One guy that's got an IQ of 104 can go on the assembly line and make 30,000-40,000 a year, putting bolts in, on a car or something, or putting, mounting rims on wheels on a rim or something. But yeah, I mean, that's he doesn't. No one's forcing him to do it. No one's putting a gun up to his head, making him do it. He could do it.
All right.
Right. So this is voluntary. This is voluntary labor. So if he doesn't want to do it, other people will. Now I was an industrial engineer for many years, and I worked in many factories, and I did time studies of many blue collar jobs of guys working on machines, stamping out parts and winding rotors and tinning leads and doing all kinds of stuff like that. And there's job rotation. You don't always just because your job is putting lug nuts on a wheel, that doesn't mean you have to do that 40 hours a week. Maybe one day he's putting lug nuts on, the next day he might be putting fenders on, then the next day he might be putting antennas on or something like that. But the thing is, there's things like that.
Headlights you put on tires.
There's
okay.
Well, again,
before you guys get into it, let me.
But anyway, it's all voluntary. If he doesn't like it, if he doesn't like
tail lights you put on headlights.
If he doesn't like it, he can leave and do other things. And a lot of people do that. I know people
Hey, thanks, boss.
I know people that work in the auto industry on the assembly line that outside of work have other interests, and that they I know this one guy is a photographer and a guitarist, and he's got several beautiful guitars, he's got several beautiful cameras, and maybe I think he's just going to work to get his pension and then quit, and then probably do something, either go and have a band, or maybe go get into photography, or maybe both. But the thing is, people, Charlie, you're thinking, you look at like this, like these are jobs that people are like a prison sentence. No, people People are using in their time off. They're taking that money they earned and they're inventing things. They're doing things.
Oh,
you
how
know.
nice.
Okay,
The boss
okay,
lets you do-
Charlie.
The boss lets you do whatever you want. And
All right, before we get into it, let me get my rebuttal in
nice.
real
That's right.
quick.
Okay, well, I'm
How
gonna,
nice
okay,
of him.
Just hold on because
I'll close it there. But yeah, but look how many. Just say look how many. You know,
And that
industries
you make
started
you
up
rich,
by
do whatever you want.
well,
see
look how many people start jobs. You know, they're talking about there's like a new 9 to 5. It's now like the 5 to 9. It's the people that get off work and then they're driving for Uber and doing
Okay.
things like this because they're doing their own thing and they're making, you know, and maybe they can create their own business and quit that assembly line
all
job.
right.
Because they're
I
not
think-
making enough money. They
All
take
right,
this
I
as a
think
job.
let me get my rebuttal in because I think I've got to educate you guys a little bit tonight on the benefits of capitalism, why it works. And I'm gonna probably go to video tonight because I think this guy explains it a hell of a lot better than I could with the benefits of capitalism. So I'm gonna do a little quick share screen here. Video is less than about 5 minutes long, but I'm sure most of you guys have heard of Mark Levin before. Capitalism's a beautiful thing, you know. And we'll see if we can get it going here in a second here. You know, and we got to get a shit. Come on. Okay, here we go.
Big supermarket the other day called.
Oh, here we go.
And how long has it been, ladies and gentlemen, when we've actually supported capitalism in this country as a people? It still amazes me. You know, you kind of live two lives, don't you? You have the everyday rush, and then you step back and you do some thinking. You sort of are more circumspect. And I was in a big supermarket the other day called Wegmans, not too far from the bunker, and I'm walking around here and I'm thinking to myself, how many countries have a place like this? We walk into a store like this, and there's 10 different types of popcorn. We walk into a store like this, and every fruit imaginable from all over the world is right there. Just throw it in your cart. The different types, styles, and kinds of bread make your head spin. Not just vanilla, strawberry, chocolate ice cream anymore, all kinds of stuff. We walk down the cereal row. Never seen so many types of cereal and so many different sizes of boxes. You go down the row that has milk, the freezer section and the fridge section. I've never seen so many different types of milk, 2%, 1%, whole milk, schmo milk, this milk, organic milk, that milk, chocolate milk, strawberry milk. Same with orange juice. It's not orange juice anymore. It's orange juice with pulp, without pulp, no acid, whatever, this, that, the other. Look at the yogurt. It's just endless. You think that stuff just shows up? It's an enormously complex system of free mobility, free decisions that create this magnificent place called the supermarket. It's incredible if you just stop and think about it. What's involved? Just in buying eggs, what is involved? Raising chickens, feeding chickens, caring for chickens, collecting their eggs, washing the eggs, transporting the eggs, the container that the eggs come in. Where does that come from? Who manufactures that? The trucks that bring the eggs to the store. Their tires, who makes that? The hardware in the truck, the electrical system in the truck, and on and on. And then it comes to the store. The store is an enormously complex thing in and of itself. It's capitalism. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And compared to what's going on in Venezuela, people are starving to death in a country that has the second or third highest reserve of oil, in a country that used to be a democracy, in a country that was the richest, or one of the richest countries south of the border, that had a healthy working middle class. People breaking into the zoos to get the animals. They're starving to death and eating the animals in the zoo. The government nationalized the toilet paper manufacturing facilities because there's not enough toilet paper. And so they nationalize these things. And so there's actually less. People can't find toilet paper. People can't get basic medical coverage of any kind. There's almost no education going on in the country because the teachers can't teach. They're busy standing in line for 5, 6, 8, 10 hours just to get some kind of morsel, something. Kids dying malnourished in Venezuela because all these schemes by the mastermind, they don't work. And as Reagan said, when the plans fail, the planners keep planning. It's impossible for Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or Paul Ryan or Nancy Pelosi or Mitch McConnell or Hugo Chavez or any of the rest of them to manage an economy. This class warfare, whether of the left or the pseudo-right, is incredibly destructive. It is Marx, as manifested in Alinsky, as manifested in these barkers and big mouths who don't know what the hell they're talking about, who spin history and spin facts and try to rile up people. They don't believe in republicanism, little r, they believe in mobocracy, as Aristotle called it. Mobocracy is not republicanism. Mobocracy is not constitutionalism. Mobocracy is not capitalism. Mobocracy is not freedom. It's a different form of tyranny. What it is, it's a different form of tyranny. And in the end, it'll make us poorer and less free.
Wow.
Tim.
Well, the
do you have
thing
a
is,
video?
Charlie, the
Do you
thing
have a
is,
video
Charlie,
working? Hey, do you have a video
Excellent
working?
take.
Charlie, I'll tell
Wow.
you something right
in a
now.
meat factory?
Charlie, the thing
Get
is
those
that
meat-
most of your
Get
factories
that
today
stuff
are
in the
getting
grocery
automated.
store?
Most of them are now adopting
How
robotics,
about a
Charlie.
video of an
Your
assembly line, buddy?
your assembly line jobs are no longer traditional because they're being roboticized, where those people get better
I like
jobs
to see
designing
inside a
robots,
factory.
learning a lot more about things. The American capitalistic system has delivered the goods for the last 300 years.
That's
And
right.
now, your
Right.
visual
Why don't you look up
labor
video?
is
Hey, why
not
don't you
there.
show video?
But you know, like I said,
children
there
working
comes a point
in a
where you do need
sweatshop.
unions, yes. But
How about
to
a
condemn the
sweatshop
entire
video?
goddamn system and throw it out and link with these stupid Marxists is crazy.
Yeah,
Our
bring in the
American way of
sweatshop.
life right now, because of the stupid class warfare that's going on, is crazy. Now, I understand, yes, we have a big increase in the way we are doing things. And yes, and if you get these monopolies, it's called the antitrust laws, which happened under, Roosevelt and other companies. If they're too big, use the antitrust laws. The thing is, though, Charlie, what you forget is that even in the last 30 years, we have seen a really big thing called the internet. 20 years ago, you wouldn't have even heard of it. I mean, 25 years ago, you wouldn't have even heard of Google. Amazon was just getting started. And we had to design. And the funny thing is, one of the biggest retailers around, called Sears, went debunked because they couldn't innovate it fast enough to embrace the new technology. Charlie, as far as I'm concerned, unions are great. They do work. They do balance off some of the countervailing problems of corporate power. But without corporate power, without capitalism, you wouldn't have the goods. You'd still have people in huts, in farms. The Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution, capitalism has delivered the goods. We're better off with free trade. There you go, Bob.
I appreciate having sweatshops.
Charlie, what do you like? What you don't like? What you don't like? You're going to store.
I don't like children having to work.
Children don't work anymore after they industrialize, Charlie.
I like to make a comment.
Okay. We're going to settle down.
Okay.
Jan, go ahead and make your comment.
Can I make a comment? I think I'm kind of.
You'll get the last word, Mark.
Can I make a comment?
Yes,
Just
please,
a minute?
Jan. Sorry.
Okay, so I feel it's a good thing that we listen to different views, but I also feel sad that people tend to keep their views as exactly what they have been held. So if that's the case, like we are not learning anything new and not expanding our horizon. I try to be open-minded and to see some points from each person, good points from each person. Having said that, I also admire, like I noticed, Tim and Charlie, you two have very different views, but you still are friends, seems
We
like.
are.
You're still friends, so I
I have
admire
a lot of
you for
respect
that.
for Charlie.
Oh, good. So I admire you for that. People who have different views, they just like fight and they act as enemies. So I admire you for holding different views, but I just wish you two can listen more to each other's
Right, right.
other points and to kind of not to reject out of hand because they just think differently. I think both of you have some valid points.
Bob, you
Yeah.
had something to say real quick, and then we'll let Mark get the last word.
Oh, no, I'm good. Go ahead. Go ahead. I was just clapping. That wasn't my hand up.
Okay, good. Vicky, you want to contribute here tonight or not at all? No, okay. All right, Mark, you'll get the last word and then we'll shut the college down and we'll keep the Zoom call open for a little bit for anybody who wants to talk afterwards. So take as much time as you need, Mark, and unmute and please give us the last word and what you thought tonight.
Excuse me for 1 second. I got to get a prop and I'll be like 2 seconds and I'll be right back.
Okay, that's just fine. And I think we're going to be doing it. Charlie, I hope I did all right with you. And
That guy didn't explain how those products got in that store. Were they like magic?
no, it came through logistics.
Or they come out of the sky?
It was called the power of
came out of the
price and
sky.
signaling, Charlie.
Right, right, yeah.
Well, the power of price and signaling. When the price goes up, more are made, more companies get into it, price goes back to normal. When they're out,
There's an
Charlie,
expression.
Charlie,
You look at
Charlie.
what I look at, but you do not
Charlie.
see what I see.
oh, Charlie, I've
Charlie.
seen it all. Most of your
I wanna,
When
so-called
you go to the
stuff.
supermarket, he didn't see anything.
Charlie,
He
I
didn't
wanna ask,
see, he didn't
Charlie.
see a farm worker.
okay,
Shut up.
Charlie.
All right,
Yeah,
Lana, go ahead and make your last comment. We'll let the Mark.
No, I just want to ask Charlie. I want to ask Charlie a question. Charlie, why you don't like capitalism? Why? What you questioning about? Okay,
What
you know
don't I like? I can't
why?
hear you.
Why you don't like it? What? It's like, tell me what the reason. It's absolutely no reason not to like, because you know if you have money a little bit, you can go to store, you can buy vegetables, fruits. You know it's not problem. You have to stay in line like in Russia, like in third countries. You know why you don't like it? Why you questioning? Tell me.
Why? Because I know how that strawberry was picked.
What?
You don't know about how working conditions are to make products. You have no idea. You have no
So-
idea how products are made.
I do. And, you know,
You never wonder. You just think they just come out of the sky,
No.
right?
no.
I know how products are made. I was an industrial engineer for years. I know how
Well, you should know that you're a
I know how tank cars were made. I actually used to work for
Okay,
Union
Shan.
Tank Car, UTLX.
All right.
The tanks you're always worried about that are gonna tip over and explode on the
Right.
train because you
Okay.
guys stopped your pipelines, which are so much better.
All right.
So can we
Jan, let's make
specific,
the-
can we
Go
be
ahead.
specific and ask each person if we are for $15 minimum wage? I mean, that's unambiguous. Are you for or against the $15 minimum wage?
Yeah,
think
why
it's-
not?
I think
it's-
it's here to stay right now because you're gonna need workers and they're starting to get a little scarce. So I think it's coming here no matter what we think.
Well, there is, I mean, what we think
What if
probably,
people?
what we
Tight-
think probably.
Tight labor markets,
matter
tight labor
is
markets have already been paying over.
your attitude
What if
towards
people-
workers.
Yeah, but what if people desperate? What if people crazy, desperate, looking for a job, any job? What if they don't have, you know, they in panic, they don't have money to pay rent. They're ready to take any job. $15 minimum wage, it's not bad.
No, but the thing is, they're not gonna get hired because they're not worth $15 an hour. So what's gonna happen, go look at Walgreens downtown, right on 122 South Michigan. Walk in there at any time of the day or night, you'll see a maximum of 2 cashiers there. They got about 10 registers, but there's never more than 2 people working. Even on the
And how
busiest,
much-
even on Christmas Eve, 2 people
And how
working.
much, and how much
And I've got
involved?
photographs to prove this, by the way, as well. I've
Okay.
photographed these lines of people.
All right,
You
let's
know,
let,
Okay.
we can continue
much
this
they
after,
pay
all right,
involved?
let's continue this after we let Mark
Okay.
Burrows make
Oh,
his
yeah, okay,
final
okay.
comment, and then we'll wrap it up, and then we can continue arguing for us. So Mark, it's all
minimum wage is a
yours.
whole thing on its own.
Mark, it's all yours.
So I'd like to thank you all for having me, and I appreciate the kind words and compliments, and I appreciate the jousting as well. That's all part of the it's all part of the process, and so like I said,
Yeah.
we find the common ground where we can find it, and agree to disagree, and come back to it later when appropriate and applicable in a civilized manner, preferably.
Yeah.
And but the process is I do want to say a few things. I mean, I can't I couldn't do this entire thing justice, but I do want to make a few points. As far as jobs being sent offshore, this has been a problem for the working class in this country, and that's one of the reasons why we need international solidarity. If workers in the third world were making 20-30 bucks an hour, then it wouldn't be the financial incentive to close up shop, and so that's one of the international labor solidarity. That's why I'm for it. As far as I mean, I've experienced unbridled runaway, no checks capitalism. I've experienced that on the railroad and in my other jobs, and so I've been taught that all my life. I've lived it the bulk of my life, and so it would be hard to convince me otherwise. But like I said, that's what I grew up with in school, as well as have lived it my entire life. So that contributes to the opinions, conclusions, and analysis that I've arrived at. And there was one other thing I wanted to respond to, but anyway, so yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for a lively discussion, and even though obviously there's some disagreements, the process itself of discussing and interacting and debating, it's all part of the process of advancing and moving forward, and so I appreciate being invited to be a part of this. So I'm not going to be able to stick around. I've got to take care of some things, and so but I want to thank you all and bid you all good night.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks a lot. And at this point, we're going to stop the taping. Good night, everybody from the College of Complexes. Recording